When my sister passed unexpectedly 10 years ago, I didn't hesitate to raise her daughter, Lily, as my own. I wasn't a mother, but I became one in the only way that counts, through presence, sacrifice, and unspoken love. I packed her lunches, braided her hair, and stayed up for every late-night fever and every heartache that came knocking too soon. I gave up vacations, retirement contributions, and any real social life. It didn't matter. She was my world. But somewhere along the way, Lily grew into someone I didn't recognize. And this year, when I missed her birthday by a single day because I was recovering from minor surgery, she laughed. Not a kind, forgetful giggle. A cruel, dismissive chuckle as she told her friends, "Well, Aunt Caroline finally forgot about me. Guess the old bird's finally slipping." She didn't know I was in the hallway. She didn't know I heard every word. But I did. I could have lashed out. Instead, I decided to give her a gift, a lesson wrapped in silence, sealed with consequence. One she'd never expect. One she'd never forget. Lily came into my life when she was just shy of her 5th birthday. My younger sister, Monica, had been a free spirit, artistic, impulsive, and tragically unlucky. Her heart gave out in her sleep one quiet spring evening. I was the emergency contact, the only stable adult in Lily's life. I didn't hesitate that I was 48 at the time, single, comfortably employed at the local library, and set in my ways. But motherhood, even in its unofficial late-blooming form, has a way of rearranging your soul. The first night Lily stayed with me, she cried until she fell asleep in my lap. I held her for hours, watching the moonlight catch in her tangled hair, and promised silently that I wouldn't let her feel that loss again. We made it work. I gave up the guest room, converted it into a bright, cozy space for her, filled with soft pinks and paperbacks. I became the field trip chaperone, the science fair partner, the underpaid tooth fairy. I was always there. Every scraped knee, every parent-teacher conference, every Thanksgiving play. The years slipped by and Lily became my shadow. She called me Aunt Carrie at first, but by middle school, she started referring to me simply as Mom when her friends were around. I never corrected her, but adolescence crept in like an uninvited guest, turning warmth into something cooler, sharper. She pulled away. I understood, or at least I tried to. I chalked it up to normal teenage angst. My friends with children assured me it was all part of the process. Still, it stung. By the time Lily turned 20, she'd moved in and out of 2 colleges and taken up residence back in my home under the polite, but increasingly entitled pretense of finding herself. I didn't mind the house being full again, not at first, but something had shifted. Gratitude had given way to expectation. Respect had given way to casual indifference. She still called me Aunt Carrie, but now it was more transactional than tender, like I was her landlord, not the woman who raised her from scratch. And yet, I continued to show up. On birthdays, I baked her favorite chocolate torte. On Christmas mornings, I still filled a stocking with thoughtful trinkets. I reminded myself that love isn't about receiving. It's about giving, even when the giving hurts. So when her 25th birthday came around and I, distracted by stitches and swelling from a small outpatient procedure, forgot to text or call right at midnight, as I usually did, I expected a touch of hurt, maybe a sigh of disappointment. What I didn't expect was to hear her laugh with her friends about it. That mocking little chuckle, the words slipping. In that moment, I felt something close, not my heart, but my willingness to protect her from consequences. I didn't confront Lily right away. That would have been easy. A slammed door, a bitter exchange, a storm of accusations. Those were tools for another household, not mine. I'd learned long ago that silence often says what shouting never can. Instead, I watched. That evening, I laid low in my study, just down the hall from the kitchen, where Lily held court with 2 of her friends. They were loud in that unself-conscious way young people get when they believe no one's paying attention. I could hear every snide comment, every smug little quip about my age, my overcaring, and how I made myself feel important with birthday calls and corny cards. It was like being dissected by laughter. But I didn't cry. I didn't interrupt. I listened, memorized, and sat with the ache. After they left, she didn't come check on me, not even to ask how my post-surgery recovery was going. She breezed past my door, headphones in, unaware or uninterested. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a legal pad, not to plan revenge. That's never been my nature, but to consider balance. I'd been holding up our life like an old pillar holds up a crumbling roof. I realized, finally, that I couldn't do that forever, nor should I. She'd grown comfortable, entitled, not just to my money or my time, but to my unconditional forgiveness. And that was the most dangerous part. So I made a decision. No dramatics, no speeches. I'd simply shift the weight, let her experience the reality of standing on her own. A gift, really, a chance for her to become something better than careless. It would start small. I quietly canceled the grocery auto delivery she took for granted. I pulled back on the utility payments, switched passwords on the streaming services she hogged. And then, the real birthday gift. I boxed up every reminder of childhood, the scrapbooks, the trophies, the baby blanket I'd saved and laundered for years, and mailed it to her new P.O. box, along with a note. For the woman you're becoming, may you find her worth remembering. Lily didn't respond right away. Not to the note, not to the package, not even to the quiet shift in her living comforts. For 2 days there was silence. Then came the confusion. "Hey, Aunt Carrie," she called out one morning, standing barefoot in the kitchen with a half-eaten banana. "Did the Wi-Fi go out or something?" I looked up from my newspaper. "No," I said calmly. "I canceled it. Thought it was time to stop paying for things you use more than I do." She blinked at me, clearly unprepared for the directness. "Okay," she replied slowly. "Well, can you turn it back on? I have some stuff I need to do." I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, not through her, but truly at her, for the first time in months. She wore an oversized t-shirt from some college she never finished attending, hair pulled up, expression fixed in a half-bored look young adults seem to default to. "I think it's time you paid for what you use," I said softly. Her eyes narrowed. "What is this? Because you forgot my birthday?" There it was. I let the silence hang like thick fog. "No," I said, "because I remembered everything else." She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and muttered something about me being dramatic as she left the room. But I saw the confusion flash across her face before she turned. The unease had begun to settle in. That afternoon, I received a text. Just one sentence. "What is this supposed to teach me?" I didn't reply. The days that followed were awkward. Lily sulked around the house, increasingly inconvenienced. The groceries didn't restock themselves. The laundry didn't fold. And the thermostat stayed just a bit too cool for her comfort. She called a few friends, complained, no doubt. But few seemed eager to accommodate a grown woman who hadn't learned to carry her own weight. On the 5th day, I found her in the living room, surrounded by the contents of the box I'd sent. Photos, crayon drawings, a pressed daisy from the park where we used a picnic. She was crying, softly, like someone mourning something still alive but out of reach. I didn't interrupt. I let her sit with it. That evening, she spoke first. "Why now?" she asked, voice quieter than usual. "Why are you doing all this now?" I paused before answering. "Because love without boundaries isn't love, Lily. It's enablement. I gave you everything I could, and maybe I gave too much. But I won't keep giving if it means you forget who you are." She looked down, a tear slipping off her cheek. "I didn't mean to laugh," she whispered. "I was just being stupid." "I know," I said, "but that doesn't make it harmless." Her apology hovered there, unspoken, but for the first time in years, she didn't reach for excuses. She just nodded. The days that followed were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that rests, but the kind that echoes. Lily began moving through the house, like someone who'd stumbled into a museum of her own life. She avoided eye contact, kept her phone face down, and rarely turned on the television. It was as if something had finally gotten under her skin, but she didn't yet know what to do with it. I kept my routine unchanged. Early mornings with coffee in the paper, tending to my flower beds in the backyard, returning books to the library's overnight slot. I gave her space, not out of cruelty, but because I understood something she didn't yet. Discomfort is the soil where maturity begins to sprout. What struck me most was the absence of defiance. In years past, any perceived slight, even a suggestion that she take on more chores, would result in passive-aggressive barbs or sudden, convenient disappearances to friends' apartments. But now she lingered. Watch me. I could feel her questions trailing behind her like a child's blanket. She wasn't ready to let go. On the third morning, she asked to join me in the garden. I handed her gloves without a word. She knelt next to me in the soil. We didn't speak for nearly half an hour, just tending marigolds and plucking weeds. Finally, she asked, "Were you ever angry about raising me?" I looked at her, surprised, not by the question, but by the tremble in her voice. "No," I said after a moment. "Never angry. Just tired sometimes. But that's love, Lily. It doesn't come prepackaged with ease." She nodded slowly. I think I took it for granted. All of it. I didn't respond. That truth had to rest inside her, not bounce back as reassurance. I've learned that too much comfort can dilute growth. Later that evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with the scrapbook open. One photo in particular caught her attention, a blurry Polaroid of us at the county fair. She was 8, cheeks sticky with cotton candy, sitting on my shoulders, pointing at the Ferris wheel. "I don't even remember this," she murmured. "I do," I said. "You begged to go up twice. You said the world looked smaller from up there, and it made you feel big." She laughed, softly this time, not mocking, remembering. "You used to say things like that all the time," I continued. "Even when you were scared, you spoke with wonder. I miss that." She turned the page, then another. Eventually, she asked, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" It was the kind of question that doesn't beg flattery. It asks for reckoning. "I think you've been lost," I said. "Not bad, but unanchored." Lily swallowed hard, fingers tracing the edges of a school award she'd won for kindness in the 2nd grade. She stared at it for a long time. "I was cruel," she said quietly. When I laughed, "I don't know why I did it. I thought you were always going to be there, no matter what, like a wall I could lean on without ever thanking." "You still can learn," I said, "but it's time you learned to stand, too." That night, she did her own laundry for the first time in months. The scent of lavender detergent wafted through the house like some small declaration of accountability. The next morning, she made breakfast. Toast and eggs, not much, but the effort landed where it mattered. She even left a note by my plate. "Thank you for never giving up on me." These small gestures, quiet and tentative, became the language we spoke for the next week. Not dramatic apologies or overwrought guilt trips. Just a slow, humble rebuilding of something once taken for granted. One afternoon, she came to me with a proposal. "I've been looking into certification programs," she said. "Not a full college route, but something I could do online while working. Medical billing, or vet tech. Something that's mine." I didn't beam with pride. I didn't shower her with praise. I simply said, "That sounds like a good start." Her smile faltered at first. Maybe she expected more, but then she nodded with quiet understanding. She didn't need applause anymore. She needed forward motion. Later that evening, I found her folding the last of the laundry and placing it neatly into the hallway linen closet. She paused when she saw me watching. "I don't deserve you," she said. "Not after how I spoke about you." I shook my head. "Don't say that. Love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing." She didn't reply, but tears welled in her eyes. She hugged me, tight, unguarded, the kind of embrace that says, "I remember now. I see you." And in that moment, I felt something settle between us. Not perfection, not even resolution, but the first stones of a bridge finally being laid. For a brief stretch of time, the house began to breathe differently. The air felt less thick with tension, and the silences between us softened into something companionable. Lily started rising earlier, sometimes joining me for tea without needing to fill the space with excuses or distractions. She asked questions, small ones, but genuine. What was my favorite flower to grow? Did I still remember her first day of kindergarten? Would I ever consider taking a trip just for me? It wasn't dramatic. There were no sweeping apologies or choreographed turnarounds. But something subtle and real had shifted. She no longer asked me for money. Instead, she offered to drive me to the pharmacy, pick up groceries, or help in the garden without being prompted. One afternoon, she came home with a second-hand desk she'd purchased with her own savings. She carried it piece by piece, cheeks flushed, and spent the afternoon assembling it in the sunroom, her new study corner, as she called it. I watched from the doorway as she arranged her notebooks and a second-hand laptop. It was the first time I'd seen her prepare a space for herself with intention. This time, she said, not looking up, I'm not going to quit halfway. I believed her, not because she sounded confident, but because she sounded accountable. We shared more of our days in those few weeks than we had in years. Sometimes we'd just sit on the porch in the early evening, watching the sky shift from lavender to navy. She asked about my childhood, about Monica, her mother, and about the kind of woman I dreamed to become before life steered me down another path. I always thought you settled, she said one night after a long pause. But now I think you chose. And maybe that's harder. I nodded. It is, but it's also more peaceful. That night, as I turned down my bed, I found a small envelope resting on my pillow. Inside was a folded piece of paper in Lily's handwriting. Happy late birthday to the woman who never stopped showing up. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize what that really means. I didn't cry, not then, but I held that note like something sacred. A few words written in ink, but carried on years of sacrifice, silent prayers, and patient love. For a moment, I let myself believe this peace would last, that the corner had been turned, and we were both stepping into something more honest, more whole. But life rarely grants redemption without a final test, and the quiet was only the eye of the storm. It began with a knock. One late morning, while Lily was at her part-time cashier job, I answered the front door to find a man in a crisp blue shirt and clipboard in hand. He introduced himself as a representative from a private loan agency. He was polite but firm. I'm looking for Lily Hendricks, he said. We've sent multiple notices about her unpaid education loan. We're now escalating recovery options, and since this is her listed residence. I stopped him right there. Lily had never once mentioned a loan, not when she dropped out of her first college, nor her second. I assured the man she didn't own the property and promised to pass along the information. He handed me a final notice, stamped in red, and left with an apologetic smile. I stood in the entryway staring at that envelope for a long time. It wasn't the debt itself that shook me. It was the secrecy. After all the progress we had made, all the honesty she seemed to lean into, she had hidden something this large, this consequential. When Lily returned that evening, I handed her the notice. She read it in silence, jaw tight, eyes scanning the page twice before looking at me. It's not what it looks like. Then tell me what it is. I said, calm but firm. She hesitated. I took out the loan to cover my second semester at Redmond. I thought I'd finish and get a good enough job to pay it back before it became a problem. But you didn't finish, I replied. No, she whispered. I didn't. And you didn't tell me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no excuse prepared, just shame rising behind her eyes. I didn't want to disappoint you again, she said finally. You've done so much. I thought if I could fix it on my own, maybe I'd earn back your respect. I wanted to tell her the truth, that my respect hadn't vanished with her choices. But I also knew that earning back trust isn't about what someone wants to prove. It's about what they're willing to confront. This isn't just about money, I said gently. It's about honesty. You've asked me to treat you like an adult. This is part of it. I know, she said quietly. I'm sorry. That night, the silence returned, not hostile, just heavier. We sat in the same rooms, but a distance had crept in again. The warmth hadn't vanished entirely, but it had dimmed, like a fire in need of tending. I could tell Lily was wrestling, not just with fear of the debt, but with the guilt of slipping backward when she thought she'd finally been climbing forward. And deep down, I knew this moment would define her more than any apology or promise ever could. The following weekend, Lily asked if we could talk. Not a casual chat in the kitchen or a passing confession in the garden, but a real sit-down conversation. I agreed, and we met in the sunroom, with a light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across her desk and the half-finished budget spreadsheet she'd started earlier in the week. She took a deep breath and sat across from me, fingers laced tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking," she began, voice level but weighted, "about everything. The loan, the way I treated you. All of it." I nodded but said nothing. I wanted her to carry the moment. "I've been applying for full-time jobs," she continued. "Not ideal ones, but steady. Something to start paying off the debt. I also talked to the loan company. They're offering a revised payment plan if I can show proof of employment." There was a fragile maturity in her tone. Not performative, not dramatized. Just quiet ownership. "That's good," I said. "That's what you need to be doing." She nodded. "I know. I wanted you to hear it from me before you saw another letter or heard from someone else." I could see the effort it took for her to say that. The Lily from just a month ago would have found someone else to blame. A professor, a system, even me. But this time, there were no scapegoats. "And there's more," she said. "I'm going to move out." The words landed with a soft finality I didn't expect. I've been looking for a small place. A room share, maybe. Nothing fancy, but something that's mine. I can't keep learning how to grow if I stay in the same place where I forgot how to be grateful. I felt something pinch behind my ribs. Not pain, exactly. Something deeper. A mix of pride and the quiet ache of impending absence. "I'll help you pack," I said. She blinked, surprised by my lack of protest. "You're not upset?" "No," I said. "I'm relieved. Not because I want you gone, but because I want you to stand." She exhaled and smiled, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "You always did know what I needed more than I did." We sat in silence after that, watching the fading light shift across the room. That night, I found her folding her clothes with care, sorting what to keep and what to donate. She even left a small stack of thank you cards on my desk. One for me, one for the neighbor who helped her with rides in high school, and one, she said, for the version of myself I'm finally saying goodbye to. She was leaving, yes, but not running. This time, it was a departure born of growth. And though I'd miss her terribly, I also knew sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is to let them go. The morning Lily left, the sky was pale and overcast, the kind of gray that softens everything it touches. Her belongings fit neatly into the back seat of her car. 2 suitcases, a few storage bins, and the desk chair she'd grown attached to. There was no chaos, no scrambling, just a quiet, measured departure. She walked through each room before leaving, pausing at the hallway where her childhood height marks still faintly traced the wall. She ran her fingers over them gently, then turned toward the front door. I stood there waiting, holding her keys I'd had copied for her when she was 16, when independence had seemed so far off. "I won't ask if you're sure," I said. "I am," she replied. "And if I ever feel unsure, I know I can find my way back. But not to live here again, just to visit, as a guest." That struck me. She wasn't rejecting what we'd shared. She was honoring it by not clinging to it out of comfort or fear. She hugged me tightly, the way she used to when she was little, arms looped under mine, face tucked into my shoulder. "I'm going to be okay," she whispered. "And I think you are too." I watched her pull out of the driveway, the car rolling down the street with gentle purpose. When she turned the corner, I stood there a moment longer, listening to the silence that followed. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. In the weeks that followed, I adjusted to the stillness. At first, the quiet startled me. No humming from her room, no cups left half-rinsed in the sink, no shoes strewn by the back door. But then, slowly, the peace became something more than absence. It became a presence of my own thoughts, of my own routines, of a life I had quietly placed on pause for 20 years. I returned to the library, not just as a patron, but as a volunteer. I joined a community gardening group and started spending Sundays at the church I'd once attended only on holidays. I even booked a weekend trip to Vermont, something I'd long postponed. One evening, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. "Aunt Carrie," it began, "I used to think the hardest part growing up was proving to the world I was strong. But now I know true strength was sitting across from me all those years, quietly giving, quietly guiding, even when I didn't see it. You never made me feel like a burden, even when I acted like one. I paid my first loan installment today. It's not much, but it's mine. I'm working full-time now at the vet clinic. They said I have a good instinct with nervous animals. I smiled when they told me. I thought of you, how you always knew when to speak and when just to sit nearby. Thank you for being my soft place to land and the gentle push I didn't know I needed. Love, Lily." I read it twice. Then I folded it, placed it in my keepsake drawer, and whispered a quiet "thank you" to the empty room. Because in the end, that was the gift I'd given her. Not a punishment, not revenge, but a mirror. One that helped her see not only who she had become, but who she still had time to be. As I sit here now, months later, with the house settled into its own rhythm, I find myself returning to a simple truth. Love, real love, isn't loud. It doesn't demand recognition or parade itself through grand gestures. It shows up day after day, often unnoticed. It folds blankets left on the couch. It restocks the coffee without being asked. It remembers birthdays, until one day forgets, and that small crack reveals a much deeper fracture. What I learned through all this is that love without boundaries becomes servitude, and servitude, no matter how willingly offered, breeds resentment in both directions. I had spent years giving and forgiving, believing that was enough. But it wasn't. Not for Lily. Not for me. We both needed the shake. The moment of truth when comfort broke and reality stepped in. Some might call what I did petty. Others might say it was overdue. But for me, it wasn't about teaching her a lesson in revenge. It was about giving her the space to see herself clearly, to rise without the scaffolding she'd mistaken for solid ground. She needed to feel the difference between dependence and belonging. And I needed to reclaim something, too, not from her, but within myself, the part of me that had become so focused on care that I forgot I was allowed to be cared for. I still miss her, the sound of her footsteps upstairs, the way she used to sing off-key when she thought no one was listening. But I don't miss the heaviness. I don't miss wondering whether I'd failed her or failed myself, because now I know I didn't fail. I showed her how to stand, and when the time came, she stood. Spring arrived gently this year. The first daffodils surfaced near the edge of the garden bed Lily once helped plant, and the wind carried a softer kind of silence through the house, a silence no longer rooted in absence, but in calm. I kept her room just as she left it, not as a shrine, but as a reminder of growth, of change, of the long, sometimes painful road toward becoming who we're meant to be. Every now and then, I step into dust or water the small ivy she insisted could survive anything. It has. In its own quiet way, it thrived. Occasionally, Lily visits on Sunday afternoons. She brings fresh bread from the bakery near her apartment and updates me on work, life, and the latest small wins she's learning to celebrate. She still stumbles sometimes. There are setbacks and doubts. But the difference now is she owns them. She faces them without flinching. That, to me, is real adulthood. Last week, she sat across from me with her hands folded and said, "I didn't realize growing up would mean letting go of the version of myself I thought was owed something." I nodded. "That version wasn't who you are, just who you thought the world should make room for." She smiled. "Thank you for not making the room." It struck me how much we both had to give up in order to grow. Not just comforts or routines, but illusions. Illusions of permanence, of obligation, of unconditional protection that stretched too thin and grew resentful in the dark. What remains between us now is something earned, not through lectures or punishment, but through presence and patience, and one hard lesson wrapped in quiet love. I don't know what the next chapter will look like, for her or for me, but I do know we've stepped into a new kind of relationship, one based not on history or guilt, but on mutual respect. And in that, I've found peace. If the story moved something in you, if it reminded you of a relationship in your own life, a boundary never set, or love quietly endured, take a moment to reflect, maybe even reach out. Change doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a single honest conversation. If you'd like to hear more stories of quiet strength, second chances, and family reckonings, be sure to follow this channel. Your support helps us continue to tell stories that matter, not just in plot, but in heart. Thank you for being here. And remember, some gift arrive long after the wrapping is gone.